Good afternoon, everyone. We're here listening to an episode of Mindfulness, Sexuality, and Relationships, and I'm your host, Anita DeFrancesco, and today our topic is sex surrogacy. And my guest is Dr. Susan Kaye, who is a leader, pioneer, and advocate for sex surrogacy. She's a surrogate partner specialist. She has training programs, and she's working very hard in making this become one of the top fields in the world of sex surrogacy, something that is very needed right now in our world. Good afternoon, Dr. Susan Kaye. How are you?
Hi, Anita. Thank you. I'm doing great.
So this the whole sex surrogacy thing. The only thing I remember about sex surrogacy was I saw a movie called The Sessions with Helen Hunt a few years back. And it was a wonderful movie to enlighten us about this. So from what I understand, you're a leader in the field and one of the only ones that I know of in the United States that's really working hard in this area of work. Can you tell me about yourself and how you got into this?
Sure. I got into hands-on work back in, now I'm going to date myself, 1985. When I first started to study massage through the Adventist Church, who had a holistic program that included body work, which was massage, charcoal therapies, food therapy, and hydrotherapy. So it was a whole new world that was opening up back in the 80s that the people were starting to open up to things that we just take for granted today, such as meditation and yoga and Reiki and Shiatsu. So all these forms of body work were just starting to get known or experimented with. And out of that interest of mine to study, know, and understand more about how we live with ourselves from the neck down, I was introduced to surrogate partner therapy. At that time, it was called sex surrogacy, as was named by Masters and Johnson, who actually started this program back in the 1960s. I was able to get trained. I got trained and actually worked at the clinic in St. Louis for Masters and Johnson. I think I'm one of the last remaining folks who were able to work with them, and I feel very privileged about that, because I saw what can happen when you bring the therapeutic world, which is what I call the neck up world, alongside of the neck down world. And so what I've done is this whole, what I call the tsunami of body work that was started in the 80s. I've taken the surrogate model, which you saw in the sessions, where it was the triadic model, which is the triangle therapeutic model of one side of the triangle is the client, another is the verbal therapist or the neck up therapist, and then the other piece is the neck down therapist, which originally was just surrogates, and now I've expanded it to include all people who do neck down work. The massage therapists, even mindfulness trainers, breathwork coaches, cuddle therapists, tantra, anyone that puts hands on, we are training them in how to work inside this triadic model. So we call it the expanded triadic model as opposed to the classic triadic model.
Okay, so this is wonderful. I mean, from what I understand, you're doing wonderful work across the United States. We are speaking with Dr. Susan Kaye. You're listening to an episode of Mindfulness, Sexuality, and Relationships. And we are talking about sex surrogacy or surrogate partner therapy. I have a question for you. I mean, tell me, what kind of person would hire a sex surrogate?
Right, very good question. I get that question a lot, actually. And the interesting thing is that the clients are finding us. They are searching for sex surrogates. Since the movie The Sessions came out, it really brought it back out from under the rug, sort of. And they're the folks that have really been disconnected from their bodies for one reason or another. It could be childhood trauma. It could be just attachment disorders. We have folks with autistic and Asperger spectrum traits that have their therapists find us. And so we have folks with late life virgins, we call them, concerns that follow along with socialization skills. How do I even get into a conversation with a woman? How do I get out of a conversation with a woman? And we have folks that come to us that are getting divorced in their later years and don't know the same thing. How do I get back into a relationship or dating? We have folks that have various dysfunctions. And the key, though, is that we only work with people who do not have partners. Surrogate partner means substitute partner. Because if they have a partner, they can practice these techniques with a partner. We work with couples in that we teach couples the toolbox of surrogate partner. We teach them the tools, but then they practice with each other. What happens with those folks that find us that are single, that's how they get to work with our surrogates, because that's their substitute partner.
Okay, so now comparing this to Tantra, how would you say that they come together, or are they totally two different types of work?
No, I believe they're within this same conversation of how do I get out of my head and into my body, especially white Tantra. And that's what I teach our clients, or what we teach our clients, is the distinctions between white and red Tantra, and that you have to have white Tantra before you can have red Tantra. You have to know your own erotic potential. Your body has to be awakened, and that's where we start. We start with hands. We awaken their hands, and we go from there, because our culture is so focused on 10%, which is our genitalia and orgasm, that there's so much pressure on both sides, men and women, to perform. So we take the performance out of what we call making love, not just having sex. And I believe that that's Tantra. Tantra teaches you the energy of making love. Yeah.
So getting into the mindfulness of this entire whole session of healing someone. So sexuality is a healing method, and surrogacy is designed to help people maybe that have some further challenges, maybe people that have disabilities. How about if we talk about people that have disabilities, say physical disabilities, in a chair, in a wheelchair? What do you see with that population?
Right. Thank you for asking, because it is an important piece of our work. When I was a surrogate, I actually worked for Bryn Mawr Rehab and was there for folks who had brain injuries. And I also worked with folks who had gone through several operations. One guy I worked with was only like in his early 30s, maybe even late 20s. He had like 27 operations, and he had tubes sticking out of him. And some of these folks just want to have an experience that they've never had. Folks that are disabled physically or disabled mentally. Even I worked for 15 years for the County of Philadelphia's mental health, mental retardation. I was a sexuality consultant for them, and we didn't arrange for sexual experiences, but we arranged for people to get touched. And we all have a basic need and desire around human touch and contact, and so that's also is a part of our work, that we work with disabled.
So what I'm hearing is that we all need touch everyone needs touch, regardless of your physical or mental condition. And the touch is very instrumental in helping the mind to adjust and the body to adjust to whatever challenges a person is dealing with in their disabled condition, we'll say, whether it be something physical, whether it be an Asperger, client, or someone that is a high functioning Asperger's or autism. These people have a lot of intimate social issues, from what I understand, and sex surrogacy work is actually a blessing for the people out here. And I've seen some books written on this as well, of how to deal with this mother if she has a child that will grow up to be, antisocial. And so how do you, here's a question for you, what kind of challenges are you seeing? What are some of the challenges that you would deal with, or what are the challenges of the clients mainly that you are faced with?
Well, our culture is really geared towards sex shame, body shame, body guilt, sex guilt. We have a very strong thread that runs through our culture around shame, guilt, and fear around being in a body. And so that's really a lot of where we start, is you with you. You have to get you with you before there can be you with other. And that's really where people gain then some sensual self-confidence and sexual self-confidence, because we build them a relationship around being a sexual being in a body that's designed for pleasure, and we help them give themselves permission to own that and then share it.
Designed for pleasure. I like that. So basically teaching them to have a relationship with the self is the one foremost important thing, and then helping them to, undo layers of shame through, what are the techniques that you use? What type of techniques that you do other than the hands-on to help these people move forward in their sexual being?
Well, of course, a lot of it starts first with the neck up. What's going on in their thought processes, and is there trauma on board still? Do we need to do some EMDR work? And I don't do that. Like I have a team. I have teams of people across the country, and so we have folks that work with us that do tapping, EMDR, mindfulness training, breath work. Those are the places where we have to start. And if somebody has Asperger's or autism, I might have to send them to someone who can prepare them to start involving their therapeutic process from the neck down. So we have to make sure that they've got some tools, techniques, and things in order in their thought life or their therapeutic requirements before we start putting hands on, because when you start putting hands on, you get a whole nother set of what we need to take a look at and push through sometimes and work on.
Just a reminder, you're listening to Mindfulness, Sexuality, Relationships. I'm your host, modern sex and relationship coach, Anita DeFrancesco, and my guest today is Dr. Susan Kaye, who is a surrogate partner specialist who has training programs and works with a team of people in dealing with these special people out there that deserve love and touch just like anyone else. So I have another question for you, Dr. Kaye. What is the success rate with your work?
Well, unfortunately, there's not been much statistical data that is gathered. I am keeping very good notes on clients and their successes, so we are building a statistical base. To find, if people were interested, you could find some documentation in my dissertation, which is online under sacredSexDoc.com. there's a tab for surrogate partner, and it talks more about the work. And also, my dissertation is there for downloading. And what I did statistically was prove that the socialization skills we teach are way more valuable and important, and the success rate inside the socialization skills is higher than folks going on to need actual genital education. So that's there. And Dr. Tova Feder, Feder, wrote a book called Sex is the Least of It. And she has in there surrogate partners telling their stories and talking about their favorite clients. There are therapists in there that work with surrogate partners. There's information on trainings around the world. I think there's three other ones. And also, she has some statistical information in there that she's gathered.
So here's a question. Can anyone call you first of all, is this for men and women? Do you work with women as well in sex surrogacy?
Oh, yes. We work with everybody. We have trained trans folks. We have gay, lesbian, and people that work with all diversities.
So if you have a female that needs this type of work, or do you have a male team of people later when it comes to the hands-on part to work with you?
Correct.
You do. Okay.
And they can start out with women. A lot of women like to start the basics with women, which is fine.
Of course.
So women can choose how they want to proceed. But yes, we have, I think we have everything covered. Everybody's covered.
Educating, and from what I understand, you have a training program that educates men and women, and they become certified. And they learn the basics of the entire, and then they can branch off and work within the triangle the pyramid that you have created. They can work within that as to what area they want to focus on more with this type of population.
Right. Correct. Yeah, they'll get our online training actually provides a comprehensive historic information gathered toolbox that we say is there's none other that's like it. Even if you don't go on to do the surrogate work, what we teach about how to hold container, how to know if a client needs a therapist. Like body workers are out there working, and they might have a client that comes in and thinks he just wants a massage, but starts to have some trauma come up from childhood, and so body workers aren't like, what do I do now? Where do I go with this person? Okay. And so we teach tools around that, how to know if a client needs more therapeutic intervention. And we also teach therapists. We work with therapists, the neck-up therapists as well, to teach psychologists, sex coaches, mental health providers, on how to recognize if a client is a candidate for touch. And it could just be cuddle therapy. I mean, what we've done is we have the team approach, again, which starts with mindfulness, breath work, cuddling, and maybe that's all a client needs, so that the therapists understand we're not here just to provide a sexual education if needed. We are here just to start getting clients out of their heads and into their bodies.
So you're able to distinguish when a man, I'll just go with men for right now, since a lot more men reach out for sexual services, we'll say, more so than a woman. But you're able to distinguish who's real and who isn't, that really needs work, and not just some person coming along that wants to, the usual, get me off kind of thing. I mean, how do you work with that? How does that, when that comes into play?
Yeah.
How do you?
Yeah, I do a 15-minute interview before I'll agree to do what I call an intake session. The interview is to make sure we are both on the same page. And then the next step is we set up an intake interview where they meet with me either by cell or Skype if they like something more personal, or depending where I am in the country, I do travel around, I can sit down and meet face-to-face. But we do most of our work online in this arena where I just need to gather data. I need some history. I need some information about early dating practices or their experiences thus far, what's going on now that they're here on the phone, and what are their relationship goals. So I gather that before I decide where they start, who is the first and the next practitioner they see.
So let's get into the war. You know, people coming back from the war, they suffer a lot of PTSD. Mm-hmm. Is this a population for you to work with, your team?
Absolutely. Our veterans really do well with this work. I have I have 3 locations in Texas actually, and I have my dream house log cabin is outside of Austin. So I do spend a lot of time in Texas, and there's a lot of military programs, a big military presence in Texas, and we are connected to healing modalities that use drumming, use equestrian therapy, and touch.
And breathing. Do you do any breathing with these clients?
Oh, yeah. Breath work is a big breath work and mindfulness. Absolutely. It's a big part of what we offer.
So this is this surrogacy, what you're doing with this and your team, it's fairly like surfacing now. It's fairly new. Not new. It's been around, but now it's coming to the surface because of what a lot of more Asperger children are being born. I really don't want to say that, but a lot are, and there's a lot of veterans that we're dealing with more so than ever. Mm-hmm. And so your work is really becoming surfacing and blossoming, is from what I see.
Yeah, we've really expanded it from the classic model. The classic model is still viable in Los Angeles. The IPSA International, IPSA International Professional Surrogate Association. They were the original group that started out of Masters and Johnson. The women bonded together and started a professional organization, so we would be seen as professionals, not somebody just off the street for hire. Not that I have anything, I don't judge that. I'm just saying we elevated the conversation around people who offer sex for healing and therapy into now being collaborative with all types of hands-on work, because the hands-on field is not going away, and we have to learn how to incorporate with the therapists. The neck-up therapists are reaching out and learning how to incorporate this very huge field that the clients are driving, because the clients are asking their therapists for body work.
Right. So this is more a medical and psychological intervention that you're providing. It's medical in a sense, or physiological and psychological.
Yeah, it's all body, mind, spirit. But if somebody has a medical issue on board, that has to be taken care of first. Like, that's something we're looking at. If they're having some prostate issues or if they're having erectile dysfunctions, we need to know that they've been medically cleared by a doc, or, we have nurses on our staff and medical professionals that we have to make sure people are medically sound and psychologically sound enough to go down this path. Right.
So this is, you're listening to an episode of Mindfulness, Sexuality, and Relationships. I'm your host, Anita DeFrancesco, modern sex and relationship coach. And my guest today is Dr. Susan Kaye, who is a surrogate partner specialist, and she works between San Antonio, Texas, and Philadelphia, and other parts of the country as well. But these are the 2 places where she is stationed a lot of the time. Where do you, Dr. Kaye, where do you see this going in the future of things? This whole pyramid of what you're doing. Do you have any idea where you see this going?
Yes, I really see that it's the future. it's the future of how we do therapy. It's not going away. The body work portion is not going away. We've evolved into realizing, since Barbara Brennan wrote her book, Hands of Light, back in the 80s, and what Masters and Johnson started, it's the growth that we have experienced as a humanity undertaking of bringing the body and the mind and, may I say, the spirit together. You know, we've evolved there now. We won't go backwards. Yeah.
So sex surrogacy is one area of this whole sexual healing, and then Tantra, which you'll be able to find this podcast on the Tantra Wisdom group page that I've created. But Tantra and sex surrogacy, they work together, but they have different populations, and they have a little bit of a different approach. Mm-hmm. And it's still all one in the same family. And
right.
yes, so let's see. Is there getting back to the movie The Sessions? What did you think about that movie when that came out? Was that right on target, or what did you think about that?
Well, of course, Hollywood is going to do Hollywood. I know Cheryl Cohen Green, who is the surrogate. That's the story. It's a true story. Cheryl and her client were fairly what's the word, represented. Let me say that. What wasn't represented was the therapist's role. The verbal therapist. They did have Helen Hunt go to the therapist, like they had the client go speak to a therapist, and then the therapist connected her to Helen Hunt. But then the therapist kind of dropped out, and so we weren't happy about that part. And there was a part where the surrogate came in and says, "Okay, get undressed," and that just never happens.
Right. That's really.
We don't do that. We look at moving very slowly, and clothes may not come off till the third or fourth, fifth session. It just depends on the client and their story or their history, but that they portrayed her kind of detached and almost condescending in some ways. We weren't happy with that part. But
and also what I didn't like is that she sort of fell in love with him.
Yes.
And that usually doesn't happen. There are boundaries. Let's talk about boundaries.
Right. Well, it's boundaries, and that's why the therapist is on board. She should have gone to her therapist and talked about that. And we've had to move clients around sometimes if the client gets too attached to a surrogate. It's absolutely missed that whole psychological piece of the work.
So this attachment and the surrogate, the surrogate therapist that goes out to work with, they have to keep mindfulness about the boundaries, about the attachment of the client wanting to feel needy or falling in love. And that's what I didn't like about that movie, that they showed her kind of falling in love with him and actually going for it. And that took away from the whole idea of what the sex surrogate is, as far as I thought.
Correct.
You know, you don't fall in love. Right. It didn't show professionalism.
Correct.
So,
yes.
And
it was our disappointment. However, it did capture the heart of the American people. That was the resurgence of the work.
It didn't make it in conversation that year at the Oscars. It didn't make it in. It didn't make it in conversation. They usually converse about different films all the time, whether they're up for awards or not. And that year was a year that I was on this SAG Awards committee, and that was one film that I was hoping that they would have at least brought. Yeah, I was on the SAG Awards committee that year, and that was one film. They sent me all the films, and nothing was said about that. It was just the whole shame of it. But then if they would have put it in a more professional light, where she wasn't falling in love with him and feeling bad for him, that's not professionalism. You have a certain empathy. You have a certain empathy.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, we say we do fall in love with our clients because we get so invested in their outcomes because you're in an intimate, connected setting. And that's why I also expanded the model because I want clients to get at least 2, if not 3 or 4 different hands-on experiences. Because otherwise, if it's just one person, just a surrogate, they think that the feelings they're feeling are because of this other person, and they don't own their own feelings and sensuality.
Right.
And they clamp on to one person and think that this is the only person I'll have this with. So that's another reason I expanded it, so that they would get connected and close to or have a loving and connected experience with several people.
Right. So if say the hands-on, the physical part of the therapy, would you change that, or would you say keeping that part of it the same throughout the 10 sessions? How many sessions normally is it, like 10 or what?
Yeah, we don't like to put numbers on because everybody's different. I call, everybody's snowflakes and they all bring to the table. But the classic model of surrogacy said average was 15 sessions.
Okay, so if the physical part of it, would that particular surrogate stay the same throughout, or would you switch that?
Well, I don't switch them. I switch them. I'm sorry, the classic model doesn't switch out, but we do. Our clients see at least 2, 3, sometimes 4 people, depending on what's going on with them.
So this gives them a little bit more of, not so much attachment, but also an experience of see who's going to move something in them differently than someone else.
Right, and it does give them more comfortable in being in the presence of other people rather than just comfortability with one person.
Right, being with a stranger and being able to unfold the shame and the hiding and the pain and undoing those layers of armor.
Correct.
So one other thing I wanted to ask you was the families. Now, I know you deal with a lot of different clients, and you deal with their families. So this has really become a family caring journey. I know you deal with their moms or dads or their brothers or sisters that actually contact you to work with one family member of theirs. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we do, and it's very rewarding work when a family trusts you and they all work together and they see to it that their brother, mostly, although we have a woman in a wheelchair that gets herself down to us out of New York. And she goes through what it takes to get herself to us. But yeah, when families are involved, it's very uplifting and rewarding.
Yeah, and one thing that I would like to say to families is that if you have a disabled, family member, it's really important to seek out for them and not be so ashamed of it, because people are ashamed. I know people in wheelchairs and the family wishes they had someone to love them, but they are ashamed to go out and find this service. So what we want to tell the audience is that if you know of anyone that is suffering either mentally or physically in some form of challenge, disablement, there is a road for them. There is help. There is love. There is a service for them, and they can find that pleasure. And be happy. At least if you want to help them, this is one way, and it's a beautiful gift.
Thank you, Anita. Well said.
Yes. So anything else you want to add? And then we're just going to say how people can reach you for training and for services, people that want to become. So we're listening to Mindfulness, Sexuality, and Relationships. I'm your host, Anita DeFrancesco, modern sex and relationship coach. Tantra Wisdom is my work. And Dr. Susan Kaye, a surrogate partner specialist who has a training program, is our guest today for people that would like to become a surrogate and also for people that are in need of the service. Can you just tell me where we can find you, Dr. Kaye?
Sure. We have a website, Institute for Mind Body Therapy, which is also imbtinternational.com. So that's our site. My email is my name, DRSUSANKAYE @gmail.com. You can drop me a note. But the site has information on the trainings, how to be put onto our mailing list. We have monthly conference calls where we have incredibly specialized professionals that are dealing in the mind or the psychological piece, that are dealing in the body, that are dealing in the spiritual realm, and bringing these three very important pieces of who we are together. So, yeah, take a look at the site, drop me a note, or Anita, you know how to get me if somebody contacts you.
Okay, so I want to thank my guest, Dr. Susan Kaye of the Institute of MindBodyTherapy.com, and this is an episode of Mindfulness, Sexuality, Relationships. I'm your host, Anita DeFrancesco, modern sex and relationship coach. Look on Tantra Wisdom group page and other social networks for this interview, this podcast. Thank you very much, Dr. Kaye.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.